All right, let's talk about what's happening at the national level. Trump this week came out with this: George Soros and his wonderful radical left son should be charged with RICO because of their support of violent protests and much more, all throughout the United States of America. We're not going to allow these lunatics to rip apart America anymore, never giving it so much as a chance to breathe and be free. Soros and his group of psychopaths have caused great damage to our country. That includes his crazy West Coast friends. Be careful. We're watching you. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So, in a characteristically direct attack, Trump throws Soros and others under the bus. Now, keep in mind that we showed during a number of reports on the Georgia Record, we showed the connections between USAID and the Soros organizations, both the Tides organization and the Open organization that he also runs, and the fact that money was flowing through these, given by USAID, but was flowing through to a number of other organizations. And we actually wrote an article that talked about the fact that Soros, as much as anybody, became a master of getting grants, getting USAID funding, and then channeling it into all the other NGOs, so that once you make that second and third jump with money, it becomes nearly impossible to show where it came from and where it went. And so it's very difficult to challenge it.
USAID gave $5 million to Open Society Foundation Macedonia. $5 million, a direct grantee. With the help of then President Barack Obama's U.S. ambassador to Macedonia, the U.S. government spent millions of taxpayer dollars to destabilize the democratically elected center-right government by colluding with Soros. So USAID is actually funding Soros, and Soros is passing those funds to the people on the ground, the local politicians, the local judges, the local prosecutors, the local anti-corruption NGOs, the local media outlets, the local trade labor groups and unions. One NGO funded by the USAID Soros Alliance paid for the translation into Macedonian of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. So USAID paid to have Saul Alinsky street protest handbooks printed. How funny is that?
There continues to be other things that are coming out which underscore just how much people have done to fight against Trump. And we'll show a couple of these. One, in this interview, Obama talks about the beginnings of the Russia Gate, if you will. And Obama himself is on record really supporting this dialogue, which has now been shown to be absolutely false.
You talked about this with the comedian Trevor Noah the other day, and you said a number of things in a row. You observed that there had been contacts between members of Mr. Trump's staff and Russian officials. Right. You noted that Trump benefited from the hacks. Your spokesman, Josh Earnest, has gone on to say this week that it's obvious that Trump knew what was going on. To what extent are you suggesting some kind of cooperation between the president-elect and Russian officials here?
Well, I'm not suggesting cooperation at all. Keep in mind that those statements were in the context of everyone now acting surprised by the CIA assessment that this was done purposely to improve Trump's chances. And my only point was that shouldn't be treated as a blockbuster because that was the worst kept secret in this town. Everybody understood that. It was reported on. Steve, if you go back and look at your stories, if you read any mainstream publication, you would see that if you have a hack of the DNC and a hack of Hillary Clinton's most senior advisor's emails, and those things are then released in drip, drip, drip fashion over the course of months, and that seem to generate consistently negative coverage, despite the fact that there's nothing in there that's particularly controversial, that it's mostly just, as I said, political gossip or routine emails between folks who are working in a campaign environment, then it's a pretty clear inference that people would draw and did draw.
So there's Obama on the record basically positioning that this was the worst kept secret in Washington, that Russia had somehow hacked the DNC and was bringing this out in order to help Trump. Remember this as things continue to evolve, because many people are pointing the arrow in the direction of this is going to get serious in the coming days, weeks, and months as we learn more and are able to prove more about what really happened. We've talked in previous weeks about the notion of hidden documents, in many cases classified documents, but sometimes not classified, just hidden. And hidden in many cases in a place where it's difficult to find, or in a place where they can immediately go to destroy those documents. Kash Patel talked about this again this week as well. Here's Kash.
Sean, I was blown away, but sadly, it's come to be expected in this town when corrupt bureaucrats weaponize and destroy law enforcement like predecessors of mine did at the FBI. And thankfully, Donald Trump's mandate and election victory was for transparency and accountability. Sean, just think about this for a second. Not only did we expose the Russiagate hoax with the greats like Devin and Trey and Johnny Ratcliffe when we were back there in the House Intel Committee excavating and exposing the FISA abuses, the corruption of political parties, and the lies to a federal court just to illegally surveil a presidential candidate. I come in then years later, nearly a decade as a director of the FBI, thinking we uncovered most of it. But sadly, we found a room locked away in the Hoover building that contained burn bags. And just for your audience, Sean, a burn bag is a government bag that is specifically created to destroy classified evidence and shred and burn it, hence the name burn bag. We didn't find one, we found 7. That wasn't the only thing we found in there. We found hard drives from our predecessors and prior FBI leadership, and folks like Page, Strzok, Comey, McCabe, Comey, the list goes on from Russiagate. The names were strewn all over these materials. Now, as our great Attorney General just told you, we can't deny or confirm what we're looking at, but what we can discuss is what we've publicly disclosed. And these documents have been publicly disclosed because the greatest way to educate and bring along the American public for transparency, initiative, and accountability under President Trump is to give them the documents. And step 1 is by cleaning house inside the walls of Hoover.
So isn't that interesting? In the FBI building itself, Kash and others are finding these burn bags. Now, Anna Paulina Luna talked about finding burn bags in an interview with Joe Rogan about a week and a half ago. Tulsi Gabbard has talked about finding these burn bags in various locations. So the infamous they, were attempting to be prepared to destroy documents rather than have them found and be able to hide what now appears to have been hidden truths that are coming to light as these are discovered. Now, understand that this is not done. They continue to search for such things. Tulsi Gabbard referred to it as the best of the best are out hunting for this all across the buildings, the offices, and in many cases, SCIFs across Washington, D.C. What else will they find? We don't know, but we bet there will be more. As we reported earlier in the week and a week ago, Washington is becoming a different town. And we also noted that Chicago may be one of the cities which next may need to be addressed in order to reduce its horrific crime statistics and clean up that city. We noted in the last show that more people had died in Chicago than had died in Afghanistan and had died in the Iraq conflicts. Isn't that amazing? So literally, wartime conflicts did not kill as many people as were killed in gunfire and gang shootings and other things in Chicago itself. That means that there's lots of work to be done, and Governor Pritzker has already been pushing back on that. More importantly, the White House came out with positioning that it's up to people to determine what they wish their city to be. And we kind of foreshadowed this. We expected that this might be the tack that would be taken. And think about if you're living in one of these cities and you know that your city, perhaps your neighborhood is not safe. You don't want that for your family, for your kids, for yourself. And so the White House is now defining that decline in safety, in health, in the environment is in fact a choice. And people, the residents, the people of those cities should get to make that choice.
Effort has vindicated what President Trump and law and order advocates have been saying for years. And this is our message to Americans in Democrat-run cities nationwide. Decline is a choice. You don't have to live in constant fear of being robbed, raped, or murdered. Your leaders are lying to you, and they have been failing you for decades. The President Trump approach of upholding law and order by letting our brave men and women in blue actually do their jobs to aggressively fight crime works. In just a few weeks, President Trump has done more for D.C. residents than Democrats did in 50 years. And this can be replicated in other crime-ridden cities across the nation. As President Trump has said, all of these elected officials in charge have to do is pick up the phone and ask for the president and the federal government's help. President Trump doesn't care if they are a Republican or a Democrat leader. He wants Americans to be safe and for every law-abiding American citizen across the country to be able to thrive in their city and in their community.
Seems like a very reasonable position, doesn't it, when she says it that way? Astoundingly, as we all know, the DC mayor and the folks running DC pushed back hard on Trump putting in place federal management for the police department, for in bringing in National Guard to do those things necessary to get crime under control and be able to beautify, in many cases, the city of Washington, begin to restore it back to its original splendor. And last week we heard from Steve Miller where he talked about the fact that as the crime statistics are seen, the real ones, the improvement will be even more dramatic once it's recognized than has been seen already. And the reason is because even in DC and maybe other cities, they've been hiding part of the crime statistics. They don't want people to know how bad it became. And so now that they're able to get under the cover and find out what really has been happening, they are foreshadowing that the change will be even more dramatic. Unbelievably, and perhaps to her credit, maybe it's just because it's really no other stance could be taken. The DC mayor came out and literally said that she appreciates the work being done now within her city, or what was her city, to change, to bring back safety, to bring back the beauty of Washington, D.C. Here's what she had to say.
Greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city. The most significant thing that we are highlighting today is the area of crime that was most troubling for us in 2023. Now, we have driven it down over the last years, but I'm going to get my glasses so I can make sure I can see it correctly. But for carjackings, the difference between this period, this 20-day period of this federal surge and last year represents a 87% reduction in carjackings in Washington, D.C. We know that when carjackings go down, when the use of gun goes down, when homicide or robbery go down, neighborhoods feel safer and are safer. So this surge has been important to us for that reason.
87% decrease. And if you recall, Steve Miller in the Oval Office said that in talking with the police officers and their leadership, they could come up with no other time in Washington, D.C., no other recorded history in which there had been no murders, given the fact that they've had no murders for a period of time during this change in who's leading the city. So we believe that there's going to be just amazing results, and we continue to see that. And when you've got the DC mayor saying thank you, that seems to foreshadow that good things are happening. So what about where good things are potentially not happening, or other things we're discovering? Well, you recall the fires out in LA, and you recall that there was poor response to, in some cases, no response. And Trump talked about the fact they didn't even have the water available to deal with the fires. Well, it's now been found out that the mayor may have been playing with multiple allegiances that had some sort of weight in all of this. Let's see this report.
Mayor Karen Bass, the ultra-leftist who sides with illegal migrants over citizens, has just been exposed in a bombshell investigation by the Daily Caller. According to their investigation, Mayor Bass took campaign donations totaling over $1 million from two Chinese Communist Party-linked bankers, both connected to what's called the United Front Work Department, China's primary intelligence and influence operation. But here's the kicker. Immediately after taking their money, Bass appointed them to her mayoral transition advisory team, the very group tasked with guiding policy and staffing decisions for her entire administration.
Isn't that amazing? Now, recall that Brian Kemp here in Georgia has been promoting our state for relocation of Chinese companies. Is there any parallel here? Well, we don't know. But this notion of China interfering in certain things, or even being able to touch certain things here in the U.S., is concerning. Here's another one. Pete Hegseth came out and talked about the fact that Microsoft itself had been allowing Chinese nationals to maintain and touch servers being in use by the government. Let's hear his report.
Department of Defense was made aware of an Obama-Biden era legacy program called Digital Escorts. For nearly a decade, Microsoft has used Chinese coders, remotely supervised by U.S. contractors, to support sensitive DoD cloud systems. The program was designed to comply with contracting rules, but it exposed the department to unacceptable risk. I mean, if you're thinking America first and common sense, this doesn't pass either of those tests. So I initiated an immediate review of this vulnerability, and I want to report our initial findings. So the use of Chinese nationals to service Department of Defense cloud environments, it's over. We've issued a formal letter of concern to Microsoft documenting this breach of trust, and we're requiring a third-party audit of Microsoft's digital escort program, including the code and the submissions by Chinese nationals. This audit will be free of charge for U.S. taxpayers. I'm also tasking the Department of Defense experts with a separate investigation of the digital escort program and the Chinese micro.
Okay, so let's think for just a minute. Where have we heard this Microsoft cloud-based server environment in use here in Georgia, and with regard to elections? Do you recall that one county contracted with a company known as Connec, even though Connec and its CEO were under investigation elsewhere in the country for having apparently let certain Chinese nationals transfer data to servers that they were working on, which were resident in mainland China? Now, recall that when data resides in mainland China on their servers, it is deemed by the Chinese government to be owned by the Chinese. So one county contracted with Connec during this period, and even though they got lots of pushback, really from all over the country, they still went ahead and claimed that, well, we're going to be using it on our Azure servers, so it'll be safe. Well, Azure servers are exactly what Pete Hegseth seems to be referring to. They are online servers used rather than in a location on site. They're used in the cloud. What county did this? DeKalb County. And they did it under the watch of their Board of Elections and with the GOP chair trying to push back, but unsuccessfully. And the GOP at that time was led by Marcy McCarthy. So what implications does this now have for DeKalb and potentially for others within Georgia? We don't know. We will pay attention to this as we go forward because, as many know, once you're involved in a particular online cloud server farm, there might be ways to transfer data or move data from server to server. We don't know, and we don't want to summarize this yet, but we can't miss that this same concern seems to have existed here in the state of Georgia.